Hello everyone. Today, on the 6th of September, India has now completed 3 years of scrapping Section 377. And on this remarkable day, Vishwakarma Expression Hub presents Expressions of Pride, an interview series where we discuss several topics related to the LGBTQ plus community and their lives to inspire and spread awareness among all of us. So today we have a very special guest who is the founder of Queer Spot India, which aims to provide global queer affirmative aid or real estate, mental health, medical aid, legal aid, and employment opportunities. And the company's final product will be launched within the next 2 months. She has always advocated for LGBTQ plus rights both within and outside the academia. She's Reet Singh. So, hello, Reet. Starting with basic questions. When did you discover your gender identity and sexual orientation? And how was the time when you came out of the closet?
Right. Ever since a very young age, I felt that, I don't fit into the heteronormative standards. My pronouns are she, they, and I identify as pansexual. It's been a journey because initially I used to think that maybe I'm bi-curious or bisexual, and the with more understanding of how gender is fluid and how sexuality is very fluid and keeps evolving over time, I realized that pansexuality is the label that suits me more. But of course, that is, I mean, subject to change. I feel like that's how it works for everybody, and one cannot really say that they will be feeling a certain way about their gender, sexuality, or their life. So yeah, and I came out of the closet I think a few years ago when I was in high school itself. But again, because of the stigma and the kind of atmosphere there is in India, it's very difficult for me to express myself or reveal my identity to certain groups of people. So I wouldn't say I'm completely out of the closet yet.
Okay, so for every individual, coming out is a momentous feat that gives them the freedom to be who they are. Hearing your story, I can totally understand your situation. Like, a lot of people do not actually know what pansexual is. Many of them, like, assume that pansexual and bisexual is just the same. So, basically, what does the term pansexual mean?
It is also very subjective. People like to define these terms according to their preferences. And to me, pansexuality is something where gender is not something I look at in people in terms of getting attracted to someone or liking someone. So I'd say gender is no bar for me. It can be a man or a woman or non-binary person, and there's no that's not one of my criteria for attraction, be it like romantic or sexual either.
Right, that is actually a much needed fact that we all us should know. So you mentioned about Queer Spot India. So where did you get the idea of forming an organization like this? Was there a particular incident which inspired you to do so, or anything else?
In general, there was no such incident, but as I mean, you already know, I extensively read up on queer studies and gender studies, and I've taken up courses and do all of that. So there's one issue that is not addressed in India is housing issues for the queer community and the kind of violence and abuse that comes with it. So initially, QSI started out as an idea where this platform would provide real estate aid to just Indian queer community. But then the idea evolved to other verticals. And I thought if we're anyway planning to make an online platform, why not go for a global audience and reach other areas that haven't been, discovered yet by other organizations. So there's that. Also, this is kind of like a one-stop destination for a lot of concrete solutions, because you don't see, I mean, you'll barely see any housing aid for queer people or legal aid. And I think that's very, very important in today's day and age.
This is actually so great. We are really glad to know about this initiative. So, like, what we have observed is that people don't come out of the closet because of the fear of society, which leads to countless mental health issues. So, like, did you face such a situation where you were trouble inside your head?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, see, all of us have come, come to that point in our lives. But for the queer community, I'd say it's very different. The issues we face are generally not something that other people are very well acquainted with. So that's why, even QSI is going to have uh, mental health professionals who are well versed with LGBTQ plus issues. So there are issues like coming out of the closet, homelessness, and anxiety, depression. Stats show that there's a lot of the most common thing is depression, actually, because you are harassed and bullied, and in so many ways. It doesn't have to be is also indirect, and it can happen in any environment, at home, at work, school, college, with friends. And for me, I have had these experiences in all sorts. Some of my friends initially, while talking to them about LGBTQ plus people, and I hadn't come out at that point, so some of them were like, I support them, but I'm glad you're straight. So that was kind of like the first time I personally faced something. But of course, there are things at home as well, and classmates and other friends. It's never ending, actually, and I don't think um, this issue will be resolved for a very, very long time.
I can definitely picture that. So, like, how was the process of them accepting you, like your family, your friends? Was it a long process that they went through, or they were pretty accepting right from the beginning?
So, as for my family, I really haven't talked to them about it, and I haven't like exactly come out to them. I mean, see, they are obviously understanding and everything. They are pretty open minded, but I'm not comfortable with having that discussion with them. That's another problem that the queer community faces. Like having such a conversation with your family who's not used to the idea of you being something which is not heteronormative or heterosexual. Um, Otherwise, I feel my friends have been pretty supportive. By friends, I mean people who know me. Of course, acquaintances and other people have had their apprehensions, but I think this is because I stay within a very privileged bubble, right? Like I am surrounded by people who are mostly liberal, and I would say that being upper class, upper caste, all these things are very important, and your environment. So I think that's kind of kept me from facing the kind of issues that the queer population does at large. But yeah, that was my experience with coming out.
I totally understand. So, moving on to the next question. In what way being pansexual has made you stronger?
Well, I think in a lot of ways it has kind of increased my understanding of gender. So a lot of people say, and I really believe in this, that gender is a social construct, and it kind of like it also is restrictive in a way, because I don't kind of understand how other people get to, differentiate between different genders. And like it's given me a clearer understanding, because see, people usually think that it's just man, woman, and transgender, when gender is like a whole spectrum. There's way more than that. And with the upcoming thing of specifying your pronouns, I think that's also kind of important to understand. Of course, it's a very ethnocentric concept, but that's a starting point, I believe. And I think it's also because it's just something that people don't really know of, and they tend to um, they like to ask me about it, and it kind of spreads more awareness. So I feel that's a plus point of being openly pan. And yeah, otherwise I think it's like it just gives me more leeway, and like I feel like this label fits me more than anything else. Of course, that is subject to change, but as of now, it's kind of just made expression better for me.
Wow, that's truly amazing. So, like, moving forward to the next question. So, like, when it comes to describing the LGBTQ plus community, why do you think the word pride in particular is used, and what does pride mean to you?
So, well, there is, of course, historic significance and meaning behind the word pride, but of course, I will not delve into that. Um, to me, I feel like, it's something that has always been, people have always been shamed for it, right? Like you've always been told that it's a medical issue, it's an abnormality, you'll get cured for it. And in the past, there have been like various experiments, and like really violent experiments as such, medical, psychological, and these were state mandated and institutionalized. And I feel like it kind of instilled this fear amongst people, and that's where the whole idea of staying in the closet came from. And like pride signifies that it's something that you should not be ashamed of. It's something that you know there's no reason to be ashamed of it. The only thing that's wrong here is how the society has been made to perceive it. But yeah, like pride is essentially like you should be proud of your identity, no matter what it is, at whatever point of time. And yeah, and even like all the colors of the rainbow and different flags, I think it adds to representation in a lot of ways. So yeah, I think pride would be it's more inclusive than even queer, I think, in terms of the right nomenclature. But yeah, that's what I think about pride.
I see. So, if we take a look at few religions, homosexuality is considered a sin. So, this in some way has entrenched the belief of homophobia among people. If we look at the history, in fact, we will find so many contradicting examples that tell us somewhat a different story. This is a very sensitive issue for a lot of people, but in the end, it's affecting the members of the community. So, what do you think about this?
Well, you're right that it has evolved over time, and earlier it used to be the actual opposite of this. And there's so many temples and shrines with depictions of homosexual activity. And I feel, see, personally, I'm an atheist, kind of leaning towards being an anti-theist, because I don't really believe in the concept of religion, and I think that um, it kind of divides more than unites people. But of course, I respect all religions and people who want to follow it. Well, there have been like arguments that it's a sin and it's morally incorrect, but at the same time, these religions also preach about equality and loving all, and God loves all. So it can be it's very clear that such ideas of something being wrong or something being a sin is very, very man made. It's got nothing to do with divinity or your faith. It's you can absolutely follow a religion that prohibits homosexuality and be homosexual and still be a religious person and devout follower of that religion.
Okay,
So
I
yeah, I think it's a problem with. I mean, it's more of a religion centric issue, like there's also like issues about gender related issues and other stuff, which I think it's a part of a larger discourse. But with respect to the queer community, I feel like this can be argued with religious context itself.
I completely agree with whatever you said right now. So, like, have you ever stood up for an LGBTQ plus person that was being harassed or bullied? Like, when was the first time when you did that?
So, the first time I remember was obviously in school. Um, you know how in India, if someone is not fitting into your general idea of what a man and a woman should act like, they are labeled like they just call names, right? Like they call names, and there are slurs that are used against them, and they're like the butt of the joke, and they're bullied at all times. So I had a friend in school. He, currently he identifies as gay, and at that point he was also not conventionally very masculine or feminine, and a lot of people had a problem with that. Like they used to make fun of him, and they used to kind of crack jokes and insult him for that. But I genuinely never saw a problem with it. So there was always instances where if there was a group activity or group project, he would be shunned, or he would be disincluded. And if he did get a group or a pair or whatever, he would be like really like harassed, like really badly harassed. So I have stood up for him a lot of times. And I mean, see, I'm very proud of where he is right now, because at that point he used to be very scared of expressing himself, and I that is completely understandable. And today he's running pages that support expressions of sexuality and gender. So I think it's just, I mean, of course, this is not about me, but like it's just little acts of aid and support. I feel they go a long way.
That's really inspiring for all of us. So, like, considering the differences, let's say, for an example, when we talk about the rights of the LGBTQ plus community, which country do you think that India should take insights from?
So this is very, very subjective. I mean, I'm a law student, so I can like point the pros and cons of every country there is. But talking about Asia, like let's take it in the Asian context, because cultural differences between the Western countries and India are very stark. So taking inspiration from their laws would be kind of very contrasting. So I'm pretty sure you might have heard of Taiwanese laws, and how they're progressing with same-sex marriage, and all of that, and even with um, media representation. So there are cons, but I think that they're taking a step forward. And in India, I mean, barely anything is legal, but in Taiwan you have there are anti-discrimination laws that protect you. There's recognition of same-sex couples, and you can adopt as a same-sex couple. And as 377 decriminalized homosexual activity, it has been always legal in Taiwan. And even stuff like conversion therapy or calling homosexuality an illness, all of that is banned. And even changing your legal gender, so there's a lot, even serving in the military. So there's endless things that I could point out, but I think India could take a lot of inspiration from Taiwan. Also considering how the conservative ideology is kind of they're kind of synonymous with each other in both the countries. So yeah, that's I think that would be a great inspiration for India.
Yeah, I hope India soon makes these amendments. And like apart from marriage and adoption, what other like a few rights that have not been granted yet by the government to the LGBTQ plus community?
So one thing I would say is the very controversial trans bill. Um, it is still not very inclusive and helpful for the trans community. So there, I feel like amendments should be made there. There should also be, like military support, people who want to join the military. There should also be legal like shelters and like government state funded shelters for people who come from homophobic and abusive households. There should also be state funded concessions, reservations, and schemes for employment and, of course, housing. Just, it's a minority. So the way any other minority is treated, I mean, of course, it's not like absolute in any sense, but they should at least try and view it as a community that is marginalized. And the same kind of aid should be extended towards the queer community.
I hope we cope up with all of these changes and incorporate it in our constitution. So, like, there are so many decentralized organizations that are running throughout the country for the welfare and development of the community. The primary goal of the majority of them is to have a safe space for discussion. Can you provide guidelines for such organizations to increase their scope and as well as a rough framework for collectively uniting them for a pan India committee that can represent them on a national level and in government institutions?
So, one thing that I'd like to begin with is that these forums should not be very restrictive. Like, one should not be questioned on what they identify as. Because if you do that, you are restricting such spaces for people who are not closeted. And that really does not make it very inclusive. That leaves out a large chunk, actually the majority of the queer community. And yeah, so that's one thing. But of course, the concerns that come with it are, what if homophobic people or trolls enter and harass people? Of course, there should be regulations for that, and they can be removed from such forums and spaces. But I feel like discussion should be very fluid, and rules should be made in such a manner that they kind of include they should be very gender neutral, and they should also kind of consider intersectionality. So I feel like intersectionality is something that is very like it's ignored a lot. So a white lesbian couple will have very different experiences from a BIPOC lesbian couple. So I feel they should have some sort of regulations for intersectionality and how to respect every caste, creed, race, gender, whatever. And to keep it pan India, I feel uh, like online forums are of course like a good way to reach out to large populations, but again, there are a lot of remote areas in India, and most of the population does not have access to internet. So I feel it should have like as you like mentioned, like there should be some state involvement. I feel like there should be workshops and centers in these remote areas for aid and creating a safe space for them.
Okay, so like incidents such as rape, bullying, harassment, abusing, eve teasing, blackmailing, and many others like are the few cases that members of the LGBTQ plus community face on a regular basis. The situation is so bad that the majority of the people from the community say that they suffer through several levels of depression or have attempted multiple suicides. So, the worst part is that most of them are inside the closet and thus cannot ask for help. What advice or information would you like to share to our audience to tackle these situations?
So, of course, I completely understand how it's so difficult to access legal aid. Like the access to justice is a huge issue, even for people outside of the queer community. You know, like issues like rape, for example. Even rape laws are not very inclusive, and do not count for instances like marital rape. So I feel like there are a lot of resources online where you get pro bono legal services, and you get therapy. You get pro bono therapy. There is. I can definitely. I mean, if someone needs any such resources, they can definitely reach out to me. And I mean, I have a bunch of these resources and links. I can obviously share it with them, and this will remain confidential. But yeah, so there's no lack of such organization. It's more of there's no awareness of these organizations instead. So yeah, that's how I feel.
Okay, I see. So, what we have come across is there are a lot of same sex couples who are fighting against the odds of society and trying to live their lives happily. In India, the status of same sex couples isn't recognized, and despite that, we see so many people on social media who are settling down and also want to have kids, which is basically having a family. So, what do you think about this, and why is it taking so much time to recognize the problems of the society?
Well, as I mentioned before, there are cultural differences and political differences as well. And I feel like it's it's a thing about intersectionality, and in Western countries it's a little more easier to live as free, live freely as open couples and individuals. And yeah, I think these issues will only be tackled when things like caste, religion, gender, all of these are tackled one by one, because I feel like they influence queer rights in a lot of ways, and it's definitely not as easy to include the kind of rights that Western countries have in India. So yeah, I think it's more of where you're situated and the kind of background you come from and the kind of environment you're in. So, and given that, I mean, our government is pretty fascist, in my opinion, at least. But yeah, so there's like a majority of conservatives. Again, that is Western language, but you know what I mean. And that makes it more difficult for queer rights to come up in India.
I get your point. And like we have seen like there are a lot of men and women who may be bisexual, pansexual or homosexual, but are still married to a person of the opposite sex, irrespective of their will or out of societal pressure. So like what do you think? What do you suggest these people should do?
Um, Again, marriage is an institution that has different connotations in different countries, and I feel like if people identify as a part of the LGBTQ community and are married, are in a heterosexual relationship, then I feel like if they're happy with that, then they should go ahead with it. But of course, I cannot suggest adultery, that is illegal. That would be also incorrect for a lot of people. But I feel if they think they can have a conversation with their spouse, they should probably do that and at least try and come out to them. I know that's not very easy. It might not be applicable to a lot of people, but again, this is more of an issue of marriage and families in India than a queer issue.
I agree with whatever you just mentioned. So, like, today, homosexuality and queer identities may be acceptable to more Indian youths than ever before, but within the boundaries of families and schools, acceptance still remains a constant struggle for the LGBTQ plus people. I have heard of people coming out of the closet and declaring to their families that they are not the person their family expected them to be. So, like, what are your thoughts on this? And do you have any suggestions to overcome the struggle of acceptance?
Well, again, there's nothing you can do to change a person's deep-rooted perceptions. The most you can do is try and educate them with proper resources, and try and explain how it affects you, and how. So the most you can do is educate them with sources, valid sources, and with your own experience. But you can't do anything beyond that, because the law is not in your hands. Their opinions are not in your hands, and their ideologies are also not in your hands. So acceptance is the only thing you can do. If you do not get accepted, is find ways to handle that rejection and the kind of emotional trauma that comes with it. For that, of course, you can seek professional help, be around friends and family that are supportive, talk about it, and there's support all over if you look in the right places. But yeah, that's what I feel about this.
Okay, so like now that we have come to the end of this interview, what message would you like to give to the students of our college who will like eventually move to the corporate world? Like if they come across a particular colleague who is a part of the community, what kind of pride heterosexuals must hold in having a friend from the community?
So, yeah, I think allyship is very important. And one thing is, don't appropriate someone's experience. You should always listen to them first and not overtake their narratives. So, if an issue comes up related to queer people at workplace, you should support them in their decision and whatever their reasoning might be, instead of telling them, this is what I think and this is how I think queer people should behave and this is how I think it should be. Your duty as an ally is to support and stand with them and stand with their causes, and not enforce your ideals on them. That is appropriation, that is not allyship. And I feel like they should always, I mean, of course, I understand that it's not very easy to publicly support queer people. That is a very valid issue. But I think people who are heterosexual and cisgender, they should use their privilege to be effective allies. And at the workplace, if their queer friends face harassment or anything of that kind, they should kind of stand up with them and approach management or HR or whoever the senior is or whoever is responsible for such a situation, and speak on behalf of their friend only if they'd like them to. But yeah, that's what I suggest.
I completely agree with it. So like thank you so much, ma'am, for having this wonderful session with us. It was really great to have you here. VED supports the LGBTQ plus community through various such campaigns each year in order to spread awareness about